Hello, time for another vlog, possibly a short one today, because I don't really have much to say. Well, I often don't have much to say, do I? So anyway, there it is. Just going to talk about odds and ends, stuff that's been happening in the news and my thoughts. First one being, as I'm in Britain, is Brexit. Will it happen? Won't it happen? It's completely unpredictable, actually. Parliament's going to have a vote on the day this video comes out, which is tomorrow, because I'm recording it. I've got the day off work, you see, Friday, as it happens. Going to have a long weekend. But who knows? Are we in? Are we out? Are we going to stay in? Is it going to be put off forever? I don't know. It was, of course, I mean, I'm kind of in favour of leaving, primarily for political reasons, in that I don't feel that policy should be imposed from the top. I think democracy and unity and so on should come from the people, and the EU is like corporatism writ large, especially when they implemented the Lisbon Treaty against the votes of the people. I mean, they didn't have a Lisbon Treaty as such, they just took all the provisions and implemented them one by one separately as items of law, or I suppose that's what you call it, rules from the EU. So given their contempt for what people think, I'm against them, basically. A lot of people are against the EU because of mass immigration. I'm not against... Well, probably mass immigration is a bad thing, but immigration on the whole is a good thing. With an ageing population, Britain is not going to be able to retain its place in the world without bringing in younger people, basically, to pay the taxes and do some of the work. Of course, in a few years, those jobs are going to be replaced by robots, and what then? I don't know. But it's another one of those unpredictable issues, like Brexit, perhaps not quite as unpredictable, or maybe it is, but it's just longer term. Darned if I know. But it's something to consider. What do you think? There is a concern with bringing people in about them bringing their culture. But on the whole, people join the culture of the target country when they move. Not entirely. I mean, when the Brits went around conquering the world, we took our culture to them. But if people are immigrating voluntarily, they tend to adopt the local country's culture. But not entirely. Some groups, like certain Muslim groups, want to introduce Sharia law and stuff like that, which is not really compatible with our Western values. So the way we do it in Britain is we say, well, they can live under Sharia law if they want to, but they're still subject to our law. So if Sharia law says they should have some punishment, then they can accept the punishment voluntarily if they want to. I'm not sure that it's a strange compromise, but anyway, whatever. I don't know if it's good or bad, but that's the way it is at the moment. The reason Britain has an ageing population, and Japan and other countries as well in the West, and actually around a lot of the world, China, much of Latin America, is in part because people's lives are lasting longer, better medical care and, more importantly, better hygiene, and more vaccinations and immunisations and things like that. I know David Icke and co don't like them, they think they're dodgy. I don't. They could be. I guess I can't rule it out, but I don't think they are. Anyway, people are living longer, but at the same time, because women around the world are being educated, they are not having so many children, because educated women, even with a basic education, start to take control and make demands. Anybody who's known women with any education know that, right? That's not a criticism, it's just a joke, really. And why shouldn't they? But one of the things is they don't want to have tons of children and be left looking after them. So through most of the world now, people are not having enough children to replace the population. So although the population is going to carry on increasing for a few more years, a couple of decades maybe, it's going to peak. The official estimate is going to peak at around 11 billion from the United Nations. However, more recent data indicates that actually it might peak at around 9, maybe 10 billion at the outside. And when you look at a country like China, for example, they are nowhere near replacing their population. They're having about half as many children as they would need to. India is replacing its population, but only just. Some parts of Africa are still reproducing rapidly, but other parts are not. And it looks like that's trending downwards. Of course, the West has been trending downwards for actually a couple of 100 years, ever since women started getting educated, in fact. Down from something like 8 kids in some families to 1.5 to 2 at the moment. And this trend is basically spreading all around the world, and it looks like it's going to overtake the population boom doom-mongering. But a country with an ageing population needs people working and paying taxes in order to pay for pensions and for the older people and so on, because we don't want to work. Let's face it, we've been working for donkey's years, right? Enough's enough. I still have to work for another 6 years or so before I can retire, unless I win the lottery or this YouTube channel starts making me enough money, which is either both of those are about equally unlikely, I think. Anyway, maybe overpopulation isn't going to be a big problem beyond the current peak, and we probably can feed that many people. An issue is, of course, it's leading to mass extinction of animals and plants, indeed, and that might make the ecosystem so unstable that actually we can't. And then population will not decline, it'll crash. But we'll see. The other news at the moment is protests. I've been watching this propaganda channel from Russia, Ruptly, on YouTube, because they have live video feeds of protests around the world, or anything basically which they think might destabilise the West a bit. They think it's propaganda, but the point of the Western values is that criticism is important. Throughout most of history, criticism was looked on as a bad thing, and people were very conservative in their values, because anything new was thought to be destabilising and therefore bad. And so progress was very, very slow until the Western Enlightenment, when people came up with the idea of questioning people's values and opinions and facts, and actually trying to find out the actual truth, rather than listening to authority. So Rockley might think they're pointing out how unstable the West is, but that is our system. So I've looked at, there's protests today and over the last few days in Barcelona because the Spanish government has put the Spanish courts have put Catalan politicians in jail for up to 9 years for holding an illegal referendum in Catalonia on independence, which the people voted for independence, and they don't like the fact that their leaders are now being put in jail, obviously. So protests there. Barcelona's been brought to a halt, basically. There's the Yellow Jacket, or whatever they're called, Maillot Jaune protesters in Paris and other places in France, but mainly in Paris, going on for weeks and weeks and weeks and months, actually, nearly a year. They just walk around. In Spain, they're sort of blocking the roads and lighting fires. They're not burning down their nice shops in their nice city, because Barcelona's quite a nice place. But they're lighting fires in the road and things like that to try and block off the police and be a general inconvenience, I suppose. In Paris, they're walking around and chanting and singing funny songs and stuff. And the French government obviously is ignoring them completely, as far as I can tell, because that's what the governments do at the moment with protests. They ignore them as much as they possibly can. They tend to send the police in and use excess violence as well, on the mainland of Europe anyway. Another reason to question the EU's attitudes, I think. There have been protests in Quito in Ecuador. Have you heard of that? I looked around in vain for it on the news. Nothing. It's so severe there that the government has actually evacuated the city themselves, and they've moved to a provincial city to operate from. But people were throwing or launching fireworks at the police, and I think the police were firing tear gas back, and it was that sort of thing. I thought, oh well, that's interesting. What's this all about then? And I went to Google News and looked on the main page there for me, and nothing, not a mention. So I thought, okay, I'll go to the World section. I clicked on World. Nothing. No mention of the news. So I thought, okay, I'll search Ecuador. Still nothing. With some hunting, I managed to find a brief mention of it, that the government had moved to another city. And it wasn't even from a link from Google News. I went to one article about Ecuador, and it was a paper from Ecuador, and they had a link to a story about it. So clearly Google News is corporate rubbish. I mean, they seem to have no clue about what I'm interested in, and I suspect they're burying the news anyway. It's fine if you want to watch rubbish, I suppose. London, we've had Extinction Rebellion protests, sitting around mainly in Trafalgar Square, but trying to cause disruption. In truth, although I support or agree that the climate and mass extinction is a big problem that we need to solve, and that we will solve, I'm getting a bit tired of their stupid stunts, to be honest. Yeah, they've got people's attention now. Now do something constructive. I think they've got to the stage where they're doing stunts to impress each other. It's becoming a bit inward looking, and the general public are getting pretty tired of it, actually. the other day, I think was it Clapham Junction or Croydon? One of these. It was a tube station anyway. Clapham, I presume, if it's a tube station. A couple of guys from claiming to be Extinction Rebellion people jumped up onto the roof of the tube train to try and stop it moving. And the commuters immediately grabbed them, dragged them off the train and beat them up. Which, yeah, that's good, to be honest. Apart from being stupid, another stupid stunt, mass transport, public transport, is one of the things they're trying to encourage people to use. So blocking it is just counterproductive. Plus, Extinction Rebellion likes to say that they are non-violent and that their protests are non-violent. And yes, they've managed to avoid rioting so far, but increasingly people are saying, and I'm starting to agree, that stopping working people getting to their jobs so they can get paid and pay the bills, because some people will get the sack from bad employers if they don't get to work on time, is not helping the working people. Actually, it's hindering them. Some of these people are living hand to mouth, and they won't get paid if they get into work late. And if they're on their way home, the last thing they want is to be hanging around, getting home an hour late and missing their dinner and generally having problems. If Extinction Rebellion wants to keep protesting, they need to target the decision makers and stop victimising members of the public. We've got the message, now get on with it and do something. Plant a tree, do something actually practical and positive. They seem to be developing towards the same mindset that Greenpeace has. I used to be quite keen on Friends of the Earth because they would come on TV and debate the issues when Jonathan Porritt was leading them, and things like that. But Greenpeace would pull stupid stunts like sailing their boat around and blocking whaling boats and stuff. I disagree with the whaling, but the stunts are just annoying in the end. They do serve to draw attention to it, but at the end of the day, all those stunts have achieved almost nothing, I think. Whether they led to some of the whaling bans or not, I'm not convinced that they did. Intelligent debate and discussion and standing around with placards I think would do as much to raise attention, actually. Or almost as much. You've got to do something spectacular to get into the media and get seen. But I found it off-putting. There's got to be somewhere in between a strategy that these people can use which does not alienate those who are naturally inclined to support them. And I think they're currently going off the rails a bit, and they better rethink their strategy. Because myself and plenty of people are getting sick to death of them, actually. Still supportive, but there's something wrong with that strategy. More protests. Hong Kong, of course. Now, the Hong Kong protests have become violent, which is also bad strategy, I think, especially in the case of Hong Kong, but maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if so. They were provoked into it by some triad gangs or something who beat up some of them, and the police using excess force as well. So they've escalated back. Whether this was deliberate policy or not, it probably was. Maybe it was meant to intimidate them. But there comes a point where you can't intimidate a crowd very easily. The authorities have to remember that at least within Hong Kong they are outnumbered by the people. And while a lot of people would never protest, a lot will, and they do there. And they know, I think, that if they are defeated now, that's the end for any true democracy in Hong Kong. But they've turned to violence, wrecking shopping centres and things of this sort, and shops from companies who kowtow to China. Can't really blame them for that, to be honest. Companies in America are also kowtowing to China and in Britain, and they should not. Simple as that. If China wants to kick them out, let them be kicked out. That's far, far, far better than importing authoritarianism. We should be exporting democracy and values of social criticism to get things improved. You can't criticise the government in China, obviously. So, how are they going to improve? They're doomed to failure if they don't accept criticism, actually, in the long run. And we in the West have to survive until they fail. At least. As I mentioned earlier in the video, in our system, criticism is like the essential starting point. Someone comes up with an idea, a conjecture, a plan. It isn't just debated in committees. If it's an important issue, everybody talks about it, and opinions get aired vehemently, and the stupid parts of the ideas are generally pushed aside or dropped. Not always, obviously, but the ideas get improved, basically. Sometimes due to dogma and political advantage, bad ideas get implemented anyway, of course, but still they're subject to criticism and revision again and again over the years. But not in China, not in other authoritarian states. So they can't improve very quickly, because you're left only with the ideas of the ruling elites, and most of them are not that smart. Okay, anybody truly intelligent is likely to get into trouble in those countries. But the Hong Kong rioters, as they must be now known, I think, are choosing a dangerous strategy, because it gives the Chinese government a kind of moral ground, a kind of excuse to attack them. Now they're holding off because they know that the West would really, really not like that. Especially with Donald Trump in power in America. However mad you think he is, I'm sure he would react very powerfully to violent intervention in Hong Kong. The British government are too cowardly to do much, I think. But Donald Trump is a bit of a maverick. He's crackers. He's perhaps democracy's only hope, ultimately, in Hong Kong. And he may be the main reason the Chinese are holding back. I don't know. The Chinese, of course, have a tradition of thinking about the long term, and they know that in 25 years or so Hong Kong is going to go fully over into their control because the agreement with Britain expires. And although they're hedging on that already, they're still trying to sort of give the appearance of keeping to it, sort of. But they've clearly realised that Britain can't do anything and isn't really willing to push the boat out to protect the Hong Kongers beyond saying, "Excuse me, old chap, would you not do that, please?" Now, as I mentioned earlier, there have been big fears that Chinese are going to become the most populous country in the world and take over everything, but because of the lowish birth rate, they're not going to. India will be the biggest country, if they're not already, very soon. I think they are already. But then their population will peak and start declining too. And the way we West can keep going is by allowing lots and lots of immigration from anywhere, really. That's how we keep ourselves relevant and alive in a world of huge other countries. At least India is a democracy. A democracy of sorts. There's no such thing as a really good democracy, but it's a democracy. China, it's going to fall or change. It just doesn't look like it at the moment. But the very system has stagnation built into it, basically. Without the brains, the criticism, all they can do is keep filching ideas from the West. And yeah, they can implement them very efficiently, like capitalism. But long term, it's a poor strategy. Again, our system, on the other hand, is a good strategy, but it's extremely unpredictable because it relies on new discoveries all the time, and you don't know what you don't know, and you can't think about or plan for what you haven't discovered yet. But all the true innovation comes from here, from the West, both socially, politically, and technologically. And yeah, they filch it, and they do it better. They produce good stuff, good gadgets, but poor political systems, and that's going to be their downfall. What do you think? Okay. Bye for now.